In the heart of the Eastern Cape, South Africa, where the rolling hills meet the vast African sky, a prophecy took root. A prophecy that would forever alter the course of the Xhosa people and have lasting consequences for the rest of South Africa. It was the mid-1800s, a time when colonial powers cast their shadows across the land, and the Xhosa nation stood at a crossroads. The colonial powers had their eyes set on increasing their land holdings and spreading their influence on African kingdoms. A young Xhosa girl, Nongqawuse, found herself at the nearby river where the water flowed gently over smooth stones. The sun dipped low, casting elongated shadows across the landscape. It was during one of her walks along the river banks that she encountered the spirits, the ancestors who whispered secrets to her. Two strangers, their presence both powerful and commanding, suddenly appeared before her. Their forms seemed to blur the boundary between the earthly and the divine. Their eyes held the weight of centuries, and their voices resonated like distant thunder. They spoke to Nongqawuse, their words echoing through the rustling reeds. The dead shall arise. Their voices carried the weight of forgotten generations, promising a resurrection beyond the veil of mortality. All living cattle must be slaughtered. Their command cut through the air, demanding a sacrifice, an offering to cleanse the tainted hands that had reared the herds. Cultivation shall cease. The fertile fields would lie fallow, awaiting renewal. New grain shall be dug. The soil would yield fresh sustenance, but only after the old had been relinquished. New houses shall be built. The Xhosa people would construct dwellings anew, their foundations rooted in faith. New cattle enclosures shall rise. The kraals would shelter a transformed future. New milk sacks shall be woven. The vessels for nourishment would be remade. Doors shall be woven with buka roots. Protection and passage would intertwine. Witchcraft, incest, and adultery shall be abandoned. The old ways would yield to a purer path. She listened, her heart both trembling and resolute. She understood that these pronouncements were not mere whispers. They were the threads of destiny woven by the spirits themselves. She would become their vessel, their messenger to the people. The river, witness to this encounter, flowed on, a silent witness to a prophecy that would shape the Xhosa nation's fate. Nongqawuse's eyes, wide and unyielding, held the weight of destiny. The spirits had chosen her, and the course of history would pivot upon her obedience and the cattle slaughtering that followed. Hi, dear viewers, as we embark on this journey through time, let us tread carefully. A path that winds through history, where shadows and light intertwine. The tale of Nongqawuse and the cattle slaughtering has been recounted from many different angles, each perspective casting its own face upon the canvas of memory. But fear not, for we shall not take sides. We are not here to judge or condemn. Instead, this video seeks to breathe life into the echoes of the past, to honor the resilience of a people who grappled with faith, sacrifice, and the inexorable march of change. So, gather close and let the firelight dance in your eyes. For within these words lies a bridge that spans centuries and connects us to those who walked before. May their whispers guide us, their struggles embolden us, and their legacy inspire us to seek understanding, compassion, and unity.
Normal baobab.
The Xhosa people, like much of the people of southern Africa, resided in homesteads, clusters of beautiful beehive-shaped houses crafted from clay, dung, long grass, and branches that blended with the natural environment with ease. These huts stood as silent witnesses to their way of life, a life intricately tied to the land and its bounties. Their ancestors taught them to honor the soil. They planted maize, millet, pumpkins and other crops, the sustenance that filled their bellies. But it is the cattle that breathed life into their days. The Cape Nguni cattle, sleek, with hides painted in earth tones, were more than mere livestock. They were symbols of wealth, status, and respect. Each beast carried the weight of generations, its horns curving toward the sky like ancestral memories. The cattle was their currency, their dowry. They determined the price of a bride, the lobola. And when the spirits hungered for offerings, it was their blood that sanctified the earth. They danced with the seasons, their rituals echoing through time. Initiations, feasts, and ceremonies, each a thread binding them to their ancestors. They honored Utiklo, the supreme being, through their ancestors. They speak to them in dreams, guide them, and when illness strikes, they turn to the rituals, the cleansing smoke, the whispered prayers. But the winds of change blew across the Cape Coast. The colonial powers, with their never-ending appetite for land and resources, cast their shadows upon the Xhosa way of life. The once harmonious rhythm of the Eastern Cape was disrupted. The colonial powers surveyed the coastline and concluded that the fertile lands were theirs for the taking. The Xhosa cattle and fields were also ripe for the taking. In their eyes, this was progress, and it was the Africans who were to pay the price. The Xhosa wars against the colonialists spanned decades and were the longest-running military conflicts in European colonial history in Africa. They resisted, fought, and mourned. They lost fertile lands and their cattle. The Xhosa rulers, draped in their traditional attire, faced the stern-faced men in foreign attire. Negotiations ensued, but the language of power was unyielding. The land treaties were signed, boundaries redrawn, and the Xhosa people found themselves caught in a web of colonial bureaucracy. So it must be understood that Nongqawuse's encounter with the ancestral figures came at a very crucial point in the history of the Eastern Cape. It was at this time that the colonial efforts were pushing even further to gain an upper hand in the conflicts that ensued. The prophecy would either prove to be a blessing, the ancestors' answer to the crying calls of the Xhosa nation, or the curse that would spell doom to them. Nongqawuse's voice quivered as she recounted the encounter to Nongqawuse, her uncle and guardian. The fire crackled, casting shadows on the walls. Uncle, they spoke of a new dawn, a cleansing fire. The ancestors demand sacrifice, renewal. The river holds their whispers. He listened, his eyes narrowing. He knew the weight of prophecy, the burden of what he was hearing from the child before him. The room remained cloaked in shadows, the air thick with anticipation. Nongqawuse's eyes gleamed as she recounted her encounter with the mysterious figures. Uncle, their voices echoed through my very bones. The men, their eyes, ancient and unyielding. Child, you weave tales like the river weaves its currents. These visions, mere whispers of the wind. Our ancestors rest in the soil, not in the mist. He would not believe the girl. He did not want to believe her, but she persisted. She described the figures, their ethereal forms, their cryptic words. The more he disbelieved her, the more he considered the prophecy. Their words echoed in Nongqawuse's heart. She pushed on, retelling what she witnessed with her own two eyes, determination etched on her face. And so, he finally yielded to the prophecy, for who was he to deny the ancestors' will? Who was he to undermine the words that carried such weight, such authority, and hope of renewal for the nation? This sounds like a good story coming out of Hollywood or a well-crafted literary exercise, but trust me, this is no tale. This a story that is well documented in the historical records and has remained in the oral history of the land. In the mid-19th century, the Xhosa people of South Africa faced immense hardship. Their cattle were plagued by a devastating disease, and colonial forces encroached upon their land. Amidst this turmoil, a seemingly ordinary girl named Nongqawuse emerged as a pivotal figure. In the early 1840s, hills and whispering grasslands of the Eastern Cape, a child was born. Her name was Nongqawuse. She entered this world with a sense of mystery clinging to her like morning mist. An orphan she was. Her parents had perished in the battles of the Waterkloof, leaving her vulnerable and alone. But fate had other plans for this young girl, a destiny that would intertwine her life with ancient spirits and the tumultuous history of her people. She found solace in the care of her uncle, MacLeod, a man of deep faith that had journeyed to the Cape Colony and returned, his heart bearing the imprint of Christianity. He became Nongqawuse's guardian, shaping her worldview and nurturing her spirit. Her momentous vision came when she was only a young girl. Although precise records are scarce, historical accounts suggest that she was approximately 15 years old at the time. Her youthfulness added to the mystique surrounding her prophecies. One day, while guarding crops against birds by the river, she encountered two strangers. These mysterious visitors claimed to be the spirits of her ancestors. Their message was cryptic yet urgent. It basically outlined the following. The dead would arise, all living cattle must be slaughtered as they had been reared by contaminated hands. Cultivation would cease, new grain must be dug, new houses would be built, new cattle enclosures would rise, new milk sacks would be made, doors would be woven with buka roots. People must abandon witchcraft, incest, and adultery. She shared these otherworldly instructions with her guardian, a deeply religious man. Together, they approached royal officials who were initially skeptical. But as events unfolded, doubt gave way to conviction. MacLeod played a critical role in interpreting and organizing her prophecies and visions. He served as the bridge between Nongqawuse and the Xhosa people, providing guidance and direction on how to fulfill the spirit's demands. As the interpreter, he conveyed the ancestral pronouncements to the royal officials, convincing them of Nongqawuse's divine connection. His unwavering faith and deep religious convictions allowed Nongqawuse's message to resonate with the community even amidst skepticism and uncertainty. Some of the people, desperate for salvation, followed Nongqawuse's prophecy. They slaughtered their cattle, burned their crops, and awaited the promised resurrection of their ancestors. The air buzzed with anticipation, and hope hung like a fragile thread. One might be left to wonder how a vision from a child would come to be believed by the people, let alone royal officials and religious figures. It can be easy for us to come up with our own theories about what the motivation behind this, but it's important to look at the events in the context of the time and the environment when this was all taking place. Like mentioned before, the Xhosa people were faced with the colonial problem that they were finding hard to decisively take care of. In the shadow of the Eastern Cape's rolling hills, they tended their cattle, their lives woven into the very soil. But the horizon bore a storm, a tempest of European ambition. The Cape colonists, like hungry wolves, eyed the fertile valleys. The Xhosa people, guardians of ancestral lands, stood firm. Around the early 1800s, the Great Fish River snaked through the landscape, a natural boundary. The Dutch East India Company had etched it as the eastern edge of their colony, but settlers paid it little heed. The Xhosa, already rooted in the region, herded their cattle along its banks. Tensions simmered, a pot of cultural collision, seasoned with suspicion. The settlers pushed eastward, their plows carving furrows into Xhosa territory. The land groaned, caught between encroaching trekkers and the Xhosa. Cattle raids sparked retaliation, and the river became a battleground. The Xhosa chiefs, Gaika and Ndlambe, locked horns, their rivalry a pawn in a larger game. In 1818, Gaika, bloodied and desperate, sought aid from the Cape. Colonial forces marched into Xhosa lands, clashing with Ndlambe's warriors. Victory crowned the British, but when they departed, Ndlambe rose again. He swept into the colony, Grahamstown trembling in his wake. The Xhosa, their hearts aflame, fought for survival. The Cape Frontier Wars raged, a century of intermittent strife. The Xhosa resisted, their spears clashing with muskets. The British, ever hungry for land, pushed the frontier eastward, but the Xhosa were no mere pawns. They fought for their cattle, their heritage, and the whispers of ancestors carried on the wind. This was only one of their problems of the time, for there was another huge problem they had to face: lung sickness, introduced by European ranchers seeking to improve their herds, swept through Xhosa kraals. Cattle fell like stars from the sky, once robust, now hollow-eyed and frail. The Xhosa watched their wealth vanish, their bellies hollowing with hunger. Desperation clawed at their hearts. The once thriving herds dwindled to mere shadows. No matter what perspective one chooses to take in understanding how the people came to believe the prophecy, the colonial wars and the cattle sickness of the time were major factors that led to belief in Nongqawuse's prophecies. The prophecy resonated with ancient narratives, the whispers of ancestors, the rhythm of myth. The people could relate to the vision. However, some say Nongqawuse communed with the divine. Perhaps she glimpsed truths hidden from mortal eyes, but others suspect darker forces, a cosmic riddle, a manipulation of fate committed by the colonial forces, where they tricked the girl to spread the message that would ultimately result in the Xhosa losing their cattle and crops in order to weaken them and take advantage of the situation for colonial conquest. So when it comes to the prophecy, it is not all the Xhosa people who believed it. Many hearts trembled with faith. They saw Nongqawuse as a conduit, an oracle bridging realms. These believers, the Amatamba, obeyed the prophecy. Their kraals ran red with blood and their granaries emptied. They clung to hope, eyes fixed on the horizon where ancestors would rise. However, a defiant minority, the Amagogotia, stood firm. They refused to slaughter their cattle, clinging to tradition and reason. Their kraals remained intact, their crops tended. They questioned Nongqawuse's visions, their skepticism a bulwark against catastrophe. The cattle killing movement swept through the villages like wildfire. The prophecy echoed in every heart. The ancestors demanded sacrifice, and the cattle bled willingly. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, the truth emerged. Salvation remained elusive. The believers had slaughtered their herds, trusting that the spirits would replenish the land, but the earth remained devastated and the crops withered. The unbelievers watched with disdain. The once fertile fields lay fallow. The maize, once golden, now whispered tales of hunger. The Xhosa people, their hands blistered from digging new grain pits, wondered if the ancestors had forsaken them. The nights were the cruelest. The cries of hungry children echoed across the valleys. The elders, their voices hoarse from lament, whispered stories of the old days when cattle roamed freely. The spirits remained silent. The dead did not rise. The land did not yield abundance. Instead, it swallowed hope like a hungry beast. The believers clung to faith, but their faith was a brittle reed in a storm. As the famine deepened, the British authorities intervened. They offered relief, meager rations, medicine, and promises of salvation. But their true agenda lay hidden: to consolidate control over Xhosa territories, to exploit vulnerability for their gain. The Xhosa people paid dearly. Tens of thousands perished, starvation gnawing at their souls, disease claiming their weakened bodies. The believers clung to faith even as their children's eyes dimmed. For 15 agonizing months, from April 1856 to June 1857, the Xhosa land quivered with tension. The believers watched for signs, the dead, the resurgence of cattle, the promised salvation. But the spirits remained silent. The sea did not swallow the settlers. Hunger gnawed at their bellies. As the famine tightened its grip, Nongqawuse and the believers grappled with the unfulfilled prophecy. They rationalized. Perhaps the unbelievers' refusal had tainted the outcome. The people, divided by faith and doubt, faced a harsh reckoning. Their herds lay slaughtered, their hearts scarred. But as the dust settled, another force slithered in. The British colonizers, their eyes gleaming with opportunity. The British had long coveted Xhosa land, the fertile soil, the strategic location, the untapped riches. Nongqawuse's prophecy was their golden ticket. They whispered to each other in smoky chambers, their plans unfolding like a spider's web. The British arrived with meager rations, grain, salted meat, and medicine. They doled out charity like coins tossed to beggars. But their true aim? To weaken the Xhosa people further, to make them dependent, to break their spirit. They offered land deals, plots in exchange for loyalty. The Xhosa, their bellies hollow, signed away ancestral soil. The ink dried, but the pain lingered, the ache of betrayal. They played their cards, the divide and rule game. They pitted chief against chief, tribe against tribe. They whispered in Nongqawuse's wake, sowing seeds of discord. The Xhosa, once united, fractured like shards of pottery. They dismantled their political structures, replaced them with puppet chiefs. They built forts and mapped the land. The Xhosa, their ancestors silent, watched their sovereignty crumble. And so, the British danced on the graves of the hungry, their boots stained with the blood of broken promises. The Xhosa, once proud, now bore the weight of betrayal, a legacy etched in hunger, exploitation, and the bitter taste of colonial cunning. In the end, though they had lost their independence, they now answered to the new lords of the land, the colonial masters. Nongqawuse faded into obscurity. She is believed to have passed away in 1898, but some historical accounts have it that she was living on a farm in Port Elizabeth by 1905. Another claims that she was alive as late as 1938. We can debate all we want, but we can all agree that whatever happened to her, her once vibrant visions are now mere echoes, her life a tapestry of tragedy. Today she rests in an unmarked grave. The river still murmurs her name, but the world has moved on. The only thing we have left of her is her only picture, a fragile relic, a tin-type photograph. It captures her face, etched with sorrow and wisdom beyond her years. The image, like her prophecy, defies time. Nongqawuse's legacy is etched in the land, the barren fields, the lost cattle, the hunger that gnawed at her people's souls. Her story, like the river's current, flows through generations, a cautionary tale of belief, betrayal, and the cost of prophecy. And so, Nongqawuse, the girl who heard the ancestors, became a footnote in history. Her prophecy shattered lives, but her name lives on, whispered by those who remember the price paid for hope. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and leave us your thoughts, comments, and suggestions in the comments section. And subscribe to our channel for more exciting content. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, stay awesome.